Chapter 1. The Forgotten Hero. The Galactic Union Embassy on Virilia Prime was a marvel of architectural achievement, a hub of interstellar diplomacy nestled among the glittering spires of the capital city. The main atrium stretched high into the sky, its crystalline walls refracting the planet's three suns into a kaleidoscope of colors. Delegates from every corner of the galaxy, humans, Valerians, Silthians, and countless others moved through the space, their voices mingling in a harmonious cacophony of languages. Talira Valen, a diplomat from the Valerian Empire, stood at the edge of the atrium, her silvery skin glinting faintly under the refracted light. She adjusted her ceremonial robe, its flowing fabric adorned with intricate geometric patterns that shifted subtly in hue. Her tall, willowy frame was the picture of composure, but beneath the surface, her heart thudded with nervous anticipation. It had been 10 years since the Dominion Wars, conflict that had ravaged her homeworld and left scars across the galaxy. As a child, Talira had been caught in one of the war's darkest moments, a Dominion raid on the Valerian capital. That day, she had nearly died. That day, a human soldier had saved her. She had never seen his face, never learned his name, but his courage had been etched into her memory. He had shielded her from the enemy, standing as an unyielding barrier against destruction. Over the years, she had clung to that memory, vowing to one day find him and express her gratitude. Today, she hoped, would be that day. The search begins. Talira's quest to find the soldier had been anything but easy. The chaos of the Dominion Wars had left many records incomplete or destroyed. What little she knew came from fragments of Valerian archives and whispered rumors among veterans. For years, she had followed dead ends and false leads, her determination unwavering despite the setbacks. Her latest lead had brought her to Virilia Prime, where the Galactic Union was hosting a security summit. Among the attendees was a retired human soldier named Jonas Reed, a man whose service record aligned with the events of the Valerian raid. The embassy's database described him as a decorated war hero, but little else was known about his current life. He had faded into obscurity after the war, avoiding the public eye. Talira turned to her assistant, Crix, a small insectoid with iridescent carapace and twitching antennae. His 6 legs clicked softly against the floor as he approached, holding a datapad in his primary set of limbs. Jonas Reed has been confirmed, Crix said, his voice a rapid chitter softened by a translation device. He's attending the summit as a consultant for the Galactic Security Council. Room 12, 3rd level. Talira's breath caught. After years of searching, she was finally close. Is there any way I can gain access to the summit? Crix's antennae drooped slightly. Only high-clearance personnel are allowed. Diplomatic credentials won't suffice. Talira frowned, her mind racing. She was not one to back down from a challenge. I'll find a way, she said firmly. Securing access. The summit was being held in a secured wing of the embassy, guarded by automated turrets and towering security droids. The entrance checkpoint buzzed with activity as attendees presented their clearance credentials. Talira observed the process from a distance, her sharp mind analyzing potential gaps in the system. Do you have a plan, Ambassador? Crix asked, his tone skeptical. I do, Talira replied, her lips curving into a faint smile. She adjusted her robe, ensuring that its reflective patterns caught the light just so. Sometimes, all it takes is the right words. She approached the checkpoint, her demeanor calm but authoritative. The security droid scanned her as she stepped forward, its mechanical voice monotone. Clearance required. State your credentials. I am Ambassador Talira Valen of the Valerian Empire, she said, her voice resonant and commanding. I am here to discuss Valerian human security cooperation, a matter of utmost importance to the Galactic Union. The droid paused, its sensors whirring as it processed her statement. After a tense moment, it stepped aside. Access granted. Room 12 is on the 3rd level. Talira allowed herself a small sigh of relief. Crix chirped in amazement as they ascended the lift to the summit floor. I didn't think that would work. It's not about deception, Crix, Talira said. It's about conviction. The meeting. The 3rd level of the embassy was quieter, its corridors lined with translucent panels displaying holographic maps of the galaxy. Talira's nerves grew sharper as she neared room 12. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. The doors to the summit chamber slid open, revealing a conference room filled with military officers, analysts, and advisors. At the far end of the room stood Jonas Reed, his broad shoulders and weathered face unmistakable even after all these years. Talira froze, her breath catching. He was older now, his dark hair streaked with gray, and his rugged features bore the lines of experience and hardship. He wore a simple utility jacket over his uniform, blending in with the other attendees. Yet, to her, he stood out like a beacon. She approached cautiously, her steps deliberate. As she drew closer, Jonas turned, his sharp eyes meeting hers. For a moment, the noise of the room faded, and the two of them stood in a bubble of silence. "Jonas Reed?" Talira asked, her voice steady despite the emotions surging within her. He frowned slightly, as though searching his memory. "That's me. And you are?" Talira took a deep breath. "My name is Talira Valen. I am from the Valerian Empire. 10 years ago, during the Dominion raid on Valerian Prime, you saved my life." Jonas's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. "Valerian Prime. I remember." His tone softened. "You were just a kid." Talira nodded, her voice trembling. "I've spent years trying to find you. I wanted to thank you for everything." Jonas looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, "You don't need to thank me. I was just doing my job." "No," Talira said firmly, her silvery eyes meeting his. "You went above and beyond. You risked your life for someone you didn't even know. That's not just a job, it's heroism." Jonas shifted uncomfortably, scratching the back of his neck. "I'm no hero, Ambassador. I'm just a soldier who got lucky." Talira smiled faintly. "You may see it that way, but to me, you're a symbol of hope. And I think the galaxy needs more people like you." A new connection. Their conversation was interrupted by a call to order from the summit's chairperson, and Jonas excused himself to join the proceedings. Talira watched him go, her heart lighter than it had been in years. She had found her hero, and though their meeting was brief, it was enough. As she returned to the atrium, Crix chirped excitedly. "You did it, Ambassador. You met him." "Yes," Talira said softly, a smile spreading across her face. "But I don't think this is the end. Something tells me our paths will cross again." Chapter 2. A Call to Action. The sun dipped low over Virilia Prime, casting its twin shadows across the bustling city. Talira Valen leaned against a railing on one of the embassy's sky bridges, gazing out at the shimmering spires that dotted the horizon. Her thoughts lingered on Jonas Reed, the human soldier who had saved her life all those years ago. Their brief meeting earlier had stirred something within her, a mix of gratitude and unfinished business. "He's a hard one to read," Talira muttered to herself, recalling Jonas's quiet humility. Behind her, the rhythmic clicks of Crix's legs broke her reverie. "Ambassador, I've just received a communique. It's urgent." Talira turned, her silvery eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Crix extended a datapad, its screen displaying the seal of the Galactic Security Council. "The Dominion. They've launched an incursion into Valerian territory. A small colony on the edge of your empire, Asterion 4, is under siege." Talira's blood ran cold. "Asterion 4? That colony is barely defended." Crix nodded, his antennae drooping. "The Galactic Union has received the distress signal, but they're hesitant to act. It's too remote, and they fear provoking the Dominion further." Talira clenched her fists. "Cowards!" She grabbed the datapad, her jaw tightening as she scrolled through the report. "What forces do we have nearby?" "Minimal," Crix admitted. "The Valerian fleet is stretched thin." Talira's mind raced. She had spent years cultivating alliances, brokering peace deals, and building bridges between species. But diplomacy alone wouldn't save Asterion 4. She needed someone who understood the Dominion's tactics, someone like Jonas Reed. Seeking the soldier. Finding Jonas wasn't difficult. He had retreated to a modest quarters in the embassy, far from the grandiose suites occupied by other dignitaries. Talira approached his door, her steps deliberate, her resolve firm. She pressed the chime, and after a moment, the door slid open. Jonas stood there, his broad shoulders filling the frame. His expression was wary but polite. "Ambassador, something I can do for you?" "Yes," Talira said without hesitation. I need your help. Jonas raised an eyebrow, leaning against the doorframe.
With what?
Asterian 4, she replied, her voice steady. It's under Dominion attack. My people need help, and I believe you're the only one who can give it. Jonas's expression darkened. The Dominion? You're asking me to go back into that fight? I am, Talira said, because you fought them before. You know their tactics, their weaknesses. And because you care. Jonas sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. I'm not a soldier anymore, Ambassador. I've done my time. Perhaps, Talira said, stepping closer. But the man who saved me all those years ago wasn't just a soldier. He was a protector, a hero, and I believe that man is still in you. Jonas studied her, his eyes searching hers for something. Finally, he exhaled sharply. You're persuasive, I'll give you that. All right, I'll help but on one condition. What's that? Talira asked. I call the shots, he said. If we're going into Dominion territory, I need to do it my way. Talira nodded. Agreed. Preparing for battle. Jonas wasted no time. Within hours, he had assembled a small strike team composed of both human and Valerian volunteers. They met in a secure briefing room, where a holographic display projected the colony of Asterian 4. The settlement was small, with only a few hundred inhabitants, and its defenses were woefully inadequate. Our priority is evacuation, Jonas said, his tone commanding but calm. We're not here to fight a war, we're here to save lives. The Dominion won't expect a quick extraction, which gives us an edge. One of the Valerian soldiers, a young man named Caliph, raised his hand. What about the Dominion forces on the ground? How do we deal with them? We neutralize them where necessary, Jonas replied. But stealth is our best weapon. If we do this right, they won't know we were there until we're gone. Talira watched Jonas with quiet admiration. He had slipped effortlessly back into the role of a leader, his tactical mind sharp and focused. Despite his earlier reluctance, it was clear that this was where he belonged. As the briefing concluded, Jonas pulled Talira aside. You're coming with us, aren't you? I am, Talira said. Those are my people. I won't abandon them. Jonas nodded. All right, but stay close to me. The Dominion doesn't take prisoners. The infiltration. The strike team arrived at Asterian 4 under the cover of darkness, their ship landing in a remote canyon just beyond the colony's perimeter. The air was heavy with tension as Jonas led the team toward the settlement, their footsteps muffled by the rocky terrain. The colony was eerily quiet, its streets deserted. Dominion dropships loomed overhead, their searchlights sweeping across the settlement. Jonas signaled for the team to split into smaller groups, each tasked with locating and escorting civilians to the extraction point. Talira followed Jonas as he moved through the shadows, his movements precise and deliberate. They entered a small housing unit, where a family of 4 huddled in fear. It's all right, Jonas said, his voice low and reassuring. We're here to get you out. The family hesitated, their wide eyes darting toward Talira. She stepped forward, her silver skin catching the faint light. You're safe now. Please, trust us. Reluctantly, the family nodded, and Jonas guided them toward the extraction point. But as they stepped into the street, a Dominion patrol appeared, their weapons raised. Down! Jonas barked, pulling Talira behind cover as plasma bolts lit up the night. A hero once more. The firefight was intense, the Dominion soldiers pressing their advantage with precision. Jonas returned fire, his movements a blur of practiced efficiency. Talira watched in awe as he took down one enemy after another, his focus unshakable. We need to move, Jonas shouted, tossing a grenade that sent the remaining soldiers scattering. Talira helped the family to their feet, her heart pounding as they sprinted toward the extraction point. The roar of the dropship's engines filled the air as they approached, its ramp lowering to reveal Crix and Caliph waving them aboard. Jonas was the last to board, covering the team's retreat with suppressive fire. As the dropship lifted off, the Dominion forces regrouped, their weapons blazing in a futile attempt to stop the escape. Talira collapsed into a seat, her chest heaving as the adrenaline subsided. Across from her, Jonas sat silently, his rifle resting on his lap. Their eyes met, and she smiled faintly. You did it, she said. We did it, Jonas replied, his voice tired but resolute. A new bond. Back on the Galactic Union ship, Talira and Jonas stood on the observation deck, gazing out at the stars. The rescued colonists were safe, and the Dominion's grip on Asterion had been loosened, at least for now. "Thank you," Talira said softly. "For everything." Jonas glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "You don't have to thank me. This felt right." Talira nodded, her silvery eyes shining with gratitude. "I think you were meant for more than being a soldier, Jonas. You're a protector, and the galaxy needs more people like you." Jonas looked back at the stars, his expression thoughtful. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of purpose, a reason to keep fighting. As they stood together, the bond between them grew stronger, forged in the crucible of their shared struggles. It was a bond that neither time nor war could break. Chapter 3. The Dominion's Retaliation. The aftermath of the daring rescue on Asterion rippled through the galaxy like a shockwave. The Valerian Empire hailed it as a triumph, a rare moment of defiance against the Dominion's overwhelming power. But for Talira Valen and Jonas Reed, the battle was far from over. Seated in the command room of the Galactic Union frigate Avenger, they reviewed reports of the operation. The rescued colonists were safe, but the Dominion's forces had regrouped, consolidating their hold over nearby systems. Their next move was inevitable, and Talira feared the consequences. Jonas leaned back in his chair, his sharp eyes scanning the holomap before them. The Dominion doesn't take kindly to being embarrassed. They'll strike back and harder. Talira nodded, her expression grim. "We've provoked them, but we couldn't let Asterion fall. The question is, where will they strike next?" Jonas gestured to the map, highlighting Arion's Drift, a key mining colony supplying resources to both Valerian and Union forces. "Here. It's the logical target. Cutting off those resources cripples the Union and isolates Valerian territories." Talira's heart sank. Arion's Drift isn't just a strategic point. It's home to thousands of civilians. If the Dominion attacks, they won't leave survivors, Jonas finished. His tone was cold, but his eyes burned with determination. "We need to get there before they do." Preparing for the worst. The Avenger was a small frigate, but its crew was resourceful. Jonas took charge of the military preparations, working alongside Valerian officers to reinforce the ship's defenses and plan for the inevitable confrontation. Despite his initial reluctance to return to the battlefield, Jonas had slipped back into his role as a leader with ease. Talira watched him from the sidelines, her admiration growing. Jonas wasn't just a skilled tactician, he inspired those around him. His calm demeanor and unyielding resolve gave the crew a sense of purpose, even as they faced overwhelming odds. "You're good at this," Talira said, approaching him during a rare moment of quiet in the war room. Jonas glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "At what?" "Leading," she replied. "You have a way of bringing people together, even in the darkest moments." Jonas shrugged, his expression turning serious. "It's not about me. It's about giving people something to hold on to when everything else falls apart." Talira's gaze softened. "That's what you did for me. All those years ago." Jonas looked away, his jaw tightening. "That was different. I didn't save you because I was a hero. I saved you because I couldn't let a child die." "And that makes you a hero," Talira said gently, "even if you don't see it." The Dominion arrives. As the Avenger approached Arion's Drift, their worst fears were confirmed. A Dominion fleet had already arrived, their massive dreadnoughts casting ominous shadows over the mining colony. Civilians scrambled for shelter as Dominion dropships descended, deploying soldiers to secure the colony. Jonas stood on the bridge, his jaw clenched as he surveyed the scene. "We're outgunned, but we can't let them take the colony. What assets do we have?" The ship's captain, a stoic Valerian named Commander Lothar, spoke up. "We have 2 squads of Marines and a handful of fighter drones. It's not much, but it's all we've got." Jonas nodded. "It'll have to be enough. I'll lead 1 squad to the colony to evacuate civilians. The second squad will create a diversion to draw the Dominion's attention." "And the ship?" Talira asked. Jonas glanced at her. "We'll need the Avenger to hold off the Dominion fleet as long as possible. Can you handle that?" Talira hesitated, then squared her shoulders. "Yes. I'll coordinate the defense. into the fire. The battle for Arion's Drift began with a thunderous exchange of fire. The Avenger weaved through the chaos, its weapons blazing as it engaged the Dominion ships. On the ground, Jonas led his squad through the colony's labyrinthine streets, moving from building to building as they gathered terrified civilians. "Stay low and keep moving," Jonas urged a group of miners, their faces pale with fear. "We'll get you out of here." The Dominion forces pressed their assault, their soldiers advancing relentlessly. Jonas's squad fought valiantly, but they were outnumbered. Plasma bolts tore through the air, forcing them to take cover behind crumbling walls. "Reed!" shouted Calith, the young Valerian soldier from Asterion 4. "They're flanking us." Jonas swore under his breath. "Hold them off. We just need a little more time." Above them, the Avenger shuddered as it took a direct hit from a Dominion cruiser. Talira gripped the command console, her voice steady despite the panic around her. "Divert power to the shields. Keep firing on their lead ship." A turning point. As the battle raged, Talira noticed something strange on her console. A faint energy signature, originating from deep within the colony. It was unlike anything she had seen before. "Jonas," she called over the comm, "there's something in the colony, an energy source. It's familiar." Jonas frowned, ducking behind cover as plasma bolts exploded around him. "Familiar how?" "I think it's Valerian tech," Talira said. "Something ancient. If we can access it, it might give us the edge we need." Jonas didn't hesitate. "Send me the coordinates." With Talira guiding him, Jonas led his squad toward the energy signature. They fought their way through Dominion forces, the sounds of battle echoing around them. When they reached the source, Jonas was stunned. It was a Valerian relic, a towering obelisk pulsing with faint blue light. Talira's voice came over the comm, filled with awe. "It's a defense beacon. If we can activate it, it could neutralize the Dominion's weapons." "How?" Jonas asked, his eyes scanning the ancient structure. "You'll need to link it to the colony's power grid," Talira explained. "There should be a terminal nearby." Jonas found the terminal, his fingers flying over the controls. "I hope you're right about this." A desperate gamble. As the beacon powered up, the Dominion forces began to retreat, their ship systems disrupted by the relic's energy. The Avenger took advantage of the chaos, launching a final barrage that destroyed the Dominion's lead ship. The remaining enemy vessels scattered, their formation broken. On the ground, Jonas watched as the beacon emitted a brilliant pulse of light, driving the Dominion soldiers back. The civilians cheered, their relief palpable. "We did it," Calith said, his voice filled with disbelief. Jonas nodded, his gaze turning toward the sky. "For now." A new mission. Back on the Avenger, Talira and Jonas stood side by side on the observation deck, watching Arion's Drift fade into the distance. The colony was safe, but the war was far from over. "You were incredible down there," Talira said. "You saved them." Jonas shook his head. "We saved them. You were the one who found the beacon." Talira smiled, her silvery eyes glowing with gratitude. "Together, then?" Jonas glanced at her, a rare smile tugging at his lips. "Together." As the Avenger prepared for its next mission, Talira and Jonas knew their fight against the Dominion was just beginning. But for the first time, they felt a glimmer of hope, a belief that, united, they could make a difference. Chapter 4. A Greater Threat. The Avenger cruised through hyperspace, its engines humming steadily. In the wake of the battle for Arion's Drift, the crew had barely begun to recover. Civilians saved from the colony huddled in makeshift quarters, their relief tempered by uncertainty. Talira Valen and Jonas Reed, however, had little time to rest. Jonas stood on the observation deck, staring out at the swirling colors of hyperspace. He'd been in countless battles, but this one felt different. The Valerian relic had shifted the balance, offering a glimmer of hope against the Dominion's seemingly unstoppable advance. Yet, it also raised troubling questions. "You're brooding again," Talira said, stepping onto the deck. Her silvery skin glinted faintly in the dim light, and her soft tone broke Jonas from his thoughts. "Just thinking," Jonas replied, his gaze still fixed on the stars. "That relic. It was powerful. Too powerful. Why was it just sitting there, untouched?" Talira frowned, her expression thoughtful. Valerian history is filled with mysteries. Our ancestors spoke of ancient technologies, gifts from the celestial architects, but much of it was lost during the Dominion's first incursions. Jonas turned to her, his brow furrowed. If there are more of those relics out there, the Dominion will be hunting for them. We need to find them first. Talira nodded. Agreed. But it's not just about finding them. We need to understand them. Before Jonas could respond, the ship's comm system crackled to life. Commander Lothar's voice was tense. Read, Valen. Report to the bridge. We have a situation. The new threat emerges. The Avengers Bridge was a hive of activity as Talira and Jonas entered. Holographic displays showed the nearby sector, dominated by a massive Dominion warship moving toward a Valerian research outpost on Yareth 9. It's the Nemesis, one of the Dominion's dreadnoughts, Lothar explained. They're heading for the outpost, likely after another relic. Talira's eyes widened. Yareth 9 is unarmed. They won't stand a chance. Jonas studied the display, his jaw tightening. We're not equipped to take on a dreadnought, but we can't let them reach that outpost. Lothar nodded grimly. Suggestions? Jonas stepped closer to the display, his mind racing. We'll need to split their attention. If we can draw their fleet away, we might have a chance to evacuate the researchers and secure the relic. Talira frowned. And how do we distract a Dominion dreadnought? Jonas smirked faintly. We make them think we're a bigger threat than we are. A dangerous gamble. Jonas and Talira devised a plan that was equal parts bold and reckless. The Avenger would approach the Nemesis at high speed, using its limited armament to create the illusion of a coordinated attack. Meanwhile, a smaller stealth craft would infiltrate the outpost to evacuate the researchers and retrieve the relic. I'll lead the infiltration team, Jonas said, strapping on his combat gear. Talira, you stay on the Avenger and coordinate from here. No, Talira said firmly. I'm coming with you. Jonas raised an eyebrow. It's going to be dangerous. I know, Talira replied, meeting his gaze. But this is my people's legacy. I have to see it through. Jonas hesitated, then nodded. All right, but stick close to me. The infiltration. The stealth craft approached Yareth 9 under the cover of the Avengers' diversion. The Nemesis unleashed its full firepower on the frigate, unaware of the small team slipping through its defenses. Jonas, Talira, and a handful of Valerian soldiers landed near the research outpost, their movements swift and silent. Inside, the outpost was eerily quiet. The researchers had barricaded themselves in a central chamber, their fear palpable as Jonas's team entered. Who are you? Asked a grizzled Valerian scientist, his eyes darting nervously. We're here to get you out, Jonas said, and to secure the relic. The scientist hesitated, then nodded toward a reinforced vault. It's in there. But the Dominion's forces are already on the surface. We don't have much time. Jonas turned to Talira. Get them to the ship. I'll handle the relic. Talira hesitated. Be careful. Jonas smirked faintly. Aren't I always? The relic's power. Inside the vault, Jonas found the relic, a massive crystalline sphere, pulsing with an energy that made the air hum. As he approached, the shard on his belt began to resonate, its glow intensifying. What are you? Jonas murmured, placing his hand on the sphere. A surge of energy shot through him, and visions flooded his mind. He saw ancient Valerian cities, their people harnessing the relic's power to create wonders beyond imagination. He saw the celestial architects, towering beings of light, forging the relics to protect the galaxy from an unnamed darkness. But the visions turned darker, showing the Dominion's relentless pursuit of the relics, their greed threatening to unravel the galaxy's fragile balance. And then, a final image, a star system shrouded in shadow, a warning of a greater threat yet to come. Jonas staggered back, his mind reeling. The relic's power was immense, but it came with a burden, a responsibility to protect it. The escape. Outside, the situation had deteriorated. Dominion forces had breached the outpost, their soldiers advancing with brutal efficiency. Talira and the researchers held their ground, but they were outnumbered. Jonas emerged from the vault, the relic hovering beside him, its energy forming a protective barrier. The Dominion soldiers hesitated, their weapons faltering against the relic's power. Time to go, Jonas said, leading the group toward the ship. The relic's energy shield deflected incoming fire, buying them precious moments. As the stealth craft lifted off, the Avenger continued its desperate battle against the Nemesis. The Dreadnought's weapons tore through the frigate's shields, but Lothar's crew refused to yield. "Punch it!" Jonas shouted as the stealth craft entered orbit. The Avenger provided cover fire, its guns blazing until the stealth craft disappeared into hyperspace. A new purpose. Back aboard the Avenger, Jonas and Talira stood in the cargo bay, the relic secured in a containment field. The ship had barely survived, its hull scarred and its crew battered. But they had succeeded. "The relics are more than just weapons," Jonas said, his voice heavy. "They're keys to something bigger, something dangerous." Talira nodded. "The celestial architects created them to protect the galaxy. But if the Dominion unites them, they'll destroy everything," Jonas finished. He turned to her, his expression resolute. "We can't let that happen." Talira placed a hand on his arm. "We won't. Together, we'll find the relics. And we'll stop the Dominion." As the Avenger drifted through the void, its crew united by a shared purpose, Jonas and Talira knew their journey was just beginning. The fight for the galaxy's future had only just begun.